here you are, sis.
Oh, thanks, Pete. You shouldn't have bothered. I could have saddled him.
Well, I had to saddle mine anyway. I'm going to go to town. Wouldn't ride too far in this heat, though. You'll melt.
Oh, I'm just going down to the swimming hole for a swim.
Well, that's a good idea. If I didn't have to go to the bank, I'd go with you.
I'm glad you can. Otherwise, I'd have to take my bathing habit.
Well, the scenery around here is even lovelier than I was told. Sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you.
Who are you? How did you get here?
I imagine the same way you did. Rode up, dismounted, took off my clothes.
This is private property and you're trespassing.
Well, according to the map in my saddlebag, this is a community water hole open to everybody.
But you had to cross Barkley Range to get to it.
Really?
Yes, and you'd better leave immediately.
Oh?
I'm Audra Barkley, and I'm ordering you to. Please.
I'll need my clothes, of course.
Well, get them.
They're on that bush.
Stop! Stay where you are.
Whatever you say.
Just let me think for a minute.
I'll tell you what. I'll trust you. You just close your eyes and I'll get out of the water.
Don't you dare! I'll get dressed first and then... Somebody's coming! Oh, they mustn't see us!
I'm willing to take my chances.
Please.
Well, in that case...
Down about a foot.
Mighty low for this time of the year.
All I can tell you is last year this time, this whole area was fine pasture. Now look around. Not enough to feed one head, let alone a herd.
Jace, are you as worried as Nick and the other boys I've been talking to?
Rain 6 weeks late. Hot weather instead of cold. I tell you, it's the start of a bad drought. Just like the kind that ruined my place in Texas.
Jared?
What's wrong?
Drought scares brought on a panic. Run on the bank this morning, cleaned it down to the last penny. It's closed its doors.
All the cash I had was in that bank.
All the cash anybody had was in that bank.
Jared?
Yes, please. Well, we're more fortunate, Scott. The bank closing hurt us pretty bad, but we should be able to stay on our feet. All of our bills are paid, and most of our enterprises are solvent.
Audra.
I'm afraid the rest of the ranchers around here are in debt up to their ears.
Excuse me, Jared.
Oh.
Mr. Breckenridge, I would like you to meet my daughter. Audra, this is Scott Breckenridge.
At your service, Miss Audra.
Audra.
I think Mr. Breckenridge and I have met before.
Yes, I have the same feeling. Where was it? Let me see. I remember. Paris. At the Duc d'Orléans' annual masquerade ball, you went as a water nymph. No? Well, London, then. The Savoy? You were dining with Count,
Scott, I'm afraid you have Audra mixed up with somebody else. Counts in the continent are still just a little bit out of her line.
Well, that's their great misfortune.
Oh, speaking of misfortunes, did you hear about the bank failure?
How awful.
Indeed it is. I'm sure under the circumstances, the family has a lot to talk about, Mrs. Barkley. I won't intrude any further.
You're not intruding at all.
Of course you're not, Scott. I'm only sorry you made the trip from San Francisco for nothing.
Not necessarily for nothing. There's a lot of money to be made in bad times as well as good. If your offer to show me around still holds, I'd like to stay in town for a while.
It certainly does. Why don't you meet me here for breakfast in the morning? We'll get an early start.
I'll be here. Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Barkley.
We look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning.
A pleasure meeting you, Miss Audra. I hope we bump into each other again sometime.
I'll see you to the door. See you in the morning, Scott.
Fine, George.
Scott Breckenridge. Is he really as successful and brilliant as they say?
Well, they don't call him the Midas Man for nothing. Everything he touches turns to gold.
Come on, Nick.
All right.
Wind him up. Got it? Morning, boys.
Morning, Nick. Heath?
Morning. What can we do for you?
That the new feed we've been hearing about?
Timothy and alfalfa.
Best quality I've seen.
That store's longer than the other two.
I was gonna try some till yesterday.
Me too. Now I haven't even got the price of a month's ordinary feed.
Well, the bank's closed and didn't do any of us any good.
We just talked to Fred Jefferson at the bank. He don't know when the bank is gonna reopen.
If we could get loans on our herds, we figured it might tide us over.
We can't keep going without supplies, Nick. That's why we come to you Barclays.
Well, we got some extra supplies, but not enough for all you boys.
That ain't what we mean, Nick. We ain't asking for a handout. We was hoping maybe you'd make us a loan. Enough to get us through till the herds are sold. Don't like asking, but there's nobody else.
If you Barclays don't help us, a lot of us is going to have to sell to speculators.
We'll lose everything.
I wish we could help, but right now, all the cash we got on hand is just enough for payroll and expenses. It's gonna have to stay that way until we sell our own herd.
Is that all?
That's all.
But what about your mills and the foundry and the mine?
Wait a minute. Not cash, Jace.
But you can raise cash on them, can't you?
If the bank were still operating, yes.
All right, Nick. Then tell us, where do we get the money?
I'm sorry. I don't know.
Well, perhaps I do. Morning, Nick.
Morning, Scott.
Heath.
Scott?
Boys, this is Scott Breckenridge. Scott, these are our neighbors. This is Titus McKelvey,
Miss McKelvey.
Morning.
Jace Holman,
Mr. Holman.
and Ed Meade.
Mr. Meade. Pleasure, gentlemen. As I was saying, I have money, and I'll be happy to advance you loans in any amounts you may need.
You mean on our herds?
I don't know anything about cattle, Mr. Holman, on your land.
What kind of terms, Mr. Breckenridge?
When is the cattle market open?
90 days.
All right, 90 days at 12%.
That's kind of high interest, isn't it, Scott?
It's twice what the bank charges.
Speculators will ask higher. And they're your only alternative, gentlemen.
You're right there.
I've heard that Stockton cattle are the finest in the valley. Their sales should cover the loans easily.
With the drought getting worse, I wouldn't count on cattle for paying off any loans.
You know, you could lose a whole herd. Remember what happened the last drought?
Nick's right, boys. Scott here is a personal friend, but I'd advise against taking him or anyone else up on short-term loans under these conditions.
You ain't hurting for money.
Jared's got a good point, gentlemen. There's a lot of risk involved in short-term loans for everyone.
Guess it's pretty much of a gamble either way, Mr. Breckenridge. If you're willing to risk it, so are we. You got a deal.
Good. Jared, would you draw up the necessary papers?
Boys, I'm advising you against these loans. But if that's what you want, I'll draw up the papers.
Your advice ain't going to feed our cattle. Thank you, Mr. Breckenridge. You got more faith in us than our neighbors.
Well, I'm glad you think so, Mr. Holman. Good day, gentlemen.
All right, boys, let's get back to work.
You're very quiet tonight, Jared. Anything wrong?
No. I was just thinking about Scott Breckenridge, wondering why he made all those loans so quickly. You know, there really isn't that much in it for him.
Are you afraid he's speculating, hoping the ranchers won't be able to pay?
Well, I don't like to admit it, but he could be. He's completely unpredictable at times.
How can you say that when he's risking so much money just to help them? Why, if it hadn't been for him, they wouldn't even be able to buy their supplies.
Audra, believe me, he's no philanthropist. He wouldn't risk anything just to help somebody.
Why, you probably just don't understand him.
I know him pretty well. I used to handle some of his legal affairs for him.
Well, I think you're wrong. I think he's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Most women do.
What do you mean?
He means he's like me, irresistible.
And he's got his choice of the most sophisticated ladies from San Francisco to Paris. So I'm afraid he wouldn't be interested in you, little sister.
Well, if those women are so fascinating, why isn't he married by now?
One woman is rarely enough for a man like Scott Breckenridge. The need for conquest is too strong. They simply aren't the marrying kind.
Aren't they?